Hello and welcome. I am Cyril Stover. Now, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, is empowered to prevent, investigate, prosecute, and penalize economic and financial crimes, and is charged with the responsibility of enforcing the provisions of other laws relating to money laundering, advance fee fraud, which is popularly known around here as 419, failed banks and financial malpractices, etc. Now, while it has recorded huge successes in the fight against corruption, the EFCC has also been accused of being selective in its prosecution of financial crimes and of being a tool for intimidating government opposition. Now, what more? The agency has also been accused of massive corruption among its operatives, including the chief executive, a situation that has made the EFCC chair a turbulent one over the years. Now, in February 2021, a new executive chairman assumed the leadership of the body, having been cleared by the Senate. Today, I'm sitting with AbdulRasheed Bawa, the very first non-police personnel to head the agency. A holder of a bachelor's degree in economics and a master's degree in international affairs and diplomacy, AbdulRasheed Bawa is a trained economic and financial crimes investigator with vast experience. He's a certified fraud examiner, certified anti-money laundering specialist, and was trained by the United States Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, the United States Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crimes, the EFCC Academy. By the way, he was among the pioneer EFCC Cadet Officers Course 1 in 2005. Now, this is only a small part of the background of the new EFCC Executive Chairman. Welcome to One on One.
Thank you very much, Cyril. Nice to have me here as well.
Right.
Thank you.
Now, you're the very first non-police personnel to assume the leadership of the EFCC, and you're taking up at a time that the organization has been in the eye of the storm with so many things going on and so many thinking perhaps this agency isn't fulfilling its mandate as it should. Are you intimidated by the enormity, the huge responsibility you carry on your shoulders in this?
No, I'm not intimidated. Rather, I'm being challenged. The EFCC itself is being challenged. People or Nigerians, because of the fact that successive leadership have come from the police, and they felt that the EFCC is supposed to be headed by the police. But the provision of the EFCC Establishment Act is very clear. It says a serving or retired security and or law enforcement agent. Then the question is, who is a law enforcement agent? Who is from the security agency? The NIA, the SSS, the Nigeria Police, Customs, these are all security or law enforcement agencies. And of course, the EFCC itself. Now, it so happened that I'm humbled that EFCC have grown, and I happens to be the first non-police, chairman of the EFCC. It's a huge challenge. We have been there from the beginning. As you said during your introduction, I was part of the course 1 of the EFCC, trained operatives of the EFCC. And of course, as myself and my colleagues, we rose through the ranks, to become from ordinary team leaders to sectional heads, to heading various zones. And the government felt that, look, time has come for somebody from within the system, and I happens to be that person. So we are not intimidated. We know what it is. What the EFCC is set out to do is very clear with the Establishment Act. You have mentioned some of the acts or laws that the EFCC is empowered to enforce: the Money Laundering Prohibition Act, Advance Fee Fraud and Other Related Offences Act, Failed Bank Recovery of Debt Act, Banks and Other Financial Institutions Act, provisions of Penal Code and Criminal Code as it relates to the EFCC, and indeed any other laws in Nigeria as it relates to economic and finance. So we are not intimidated. We know what it is. and we can do it, and God willing, we are going to do it.
All right, you rose through the ranks, so you're certainly familiar with the operations. You've headed the Port Harcourt operations as well as Lagos operations, and these are considered some of the biggest zones. You've headed those zones, so you're quite familiar with what is at stake here. Coupled with cleaning up the image of the organization. Now, one of the very first things we'll talk about when it comes to the EFCC carrying out its mandate is that cases drag on and on and on in courts until perhaps people lose interest in it. How do you intend to tackle that to start with?
Well, the issue of delayed in prosecution, Cyril, there are a lot of factors in it. On our part, the EFCC or any prosecutorial agency is that we'll ensure that we thoroughly investigate the matter. In the EFCC, what we do, we have our own legal department. So, and we have, of course, the investigation department. At the conclusion of investigation, we transfer the files to the legal department. Now the lawyers will go through the file, vet it, analyze it, look at it, and then it will come up to say, look, we have a case here. And of course, they can go ahead, develop charges, and file in court. At that point in time, we have done our bit. It's out of our own control. Now the courts are being guided by, of course, their own rules, their own regulations, the administration of Criminal Justice Act itself, and a lot of other considerations. Now, one of the things that cause delays in the prosecution of these cases, or the prosecution of these, we have been accused of several things. For instance, that EFCC will come up with 150 charges, with 160 charges, etc. That is one of the accusations that is on our part. And we said, no, look, if you investigate, for instance, a public official that has acquired properties in Nigeria and outside Nigeria, let's say 50 houses, the court is not going to give you what you did not demand. And that means we have to have charges on some of these or all of these properties to be able to get them back. Because without those charges, you understand, the court will not come and rule to say that they are giving you, or in terms of restitution and all of that, the house that you have not demanded for it. Now, in fairness to the court itself, if you look at the dockets of the judges, it's enormous on their own part. You will see a court or a judge, in his docket, he's having 600 cases, 700 cases. How is he even going to comply with the provision of AJA 2015 that provides for day-to-day trials? It is practically impossible. Just yesterday, I had a meeting with a couple of judges, and they said, look, every week we are receiving 120 cases, at least on the average. And that is the cases that they have to distribute to this. So there is also that challenge of the fact that, the judges have a lot on their own hands as well without this. So maybe having new judges employed, or the sentiment of special court, which I'll come back to you later on.
We'll talk about
and will tend to ease some of these problems. Then the general issue that bring about these delays, I think, is, of course, the defense counsels, trying to delay trials unnecessarily because they knew that the cases against their clients, is watertight. So they will come up with all sorts of applications that, of course, the courts cannot deny them, considering the provisions of the Evidence Act, considering the provisions of the Administration of Criminal Justice. They can come and challenge the jurisdiction of the court. Nobody can tell them that you cannot do that. Right. They will come and, of course, at times even challenge, the biasness of the judge himself. And in that case, he has to rule on all of it. And then, of course, administration, tendering of documents, etc., in terms of admission of evidence, all sort of things. They can come up with objections left, right, center.
While all of these may seem understandable, there's one point which people point to, and that is, yes, you have 124 charges, count charges, and at the end of the day, 115 are thrown out. So the question is, why don't you pick, if it's just 4 counts that you think you can make stick? Wouldn't it be better to go for those than go for 100 and at the end of the day lose virtually all of it? And that's what people just
no, Cyril, I doubt much if the charges that we have, you tend to see that 115 are being thrown out. Looking at the statistics and looking at the high-profile cases, I doubt much if that happens. And as I said earlier on, we have cases, for instance, that borders on advance fee fraud, where a young man is arrested with several fraudulent documents. Now, if, of course, you are looking at all those documents that are in his possession, which he can be charged on, maybe 100 or 50, at the end of the trial, he may be convicted on all of them. But the sentencing, of course, is going to run concurrently. Now, these forged documents, we look at it, and maybe you file 5, 6, where you are not, in the long run, looking to restitute the victim. But in a situation, as I said, where you have this process of crime, and remember, it is very, very important to deny the criminals access to these funds, because that is what they normally use to fight back. That is what they normally use, to go against so many things within the society. So we need to get those properties back, and without demanding for them, by way of charging them, the court cannot give you. Hence, of course, the multiple number of charges.
All right. So, and in prosecuting these cases and making sure you get convictions, how would you assess over the years what the EFCC has been able to do? There are times 2 things occur here. First, you do hear public opinion say, oh, well, it's only the tip of the iceberg. They're only able to pick up a few of the real, kingpins, and that small fries most of the times are picked up and convictions are secured. The high-profile people can hire big defenses and get away with it. And that's one aspect. The second aspect is what has been referred to as media trial. You talked about it, doing a thorough job of investigating. And again, one of the issues is you hear in the media everywhere, oh, EFCC goes after Chief XYZ or Dr. ABC, and it's all awash in the media. And in the long run, a conviction is not secured, and people see that as you've not finished investigating, and yet it's in the public view. How do you respond to that?
Well, you have asked 2 things. Let me answer the first one, which is the issue of the fact that we tend to charge small fries and we leave the big ones. Sorry, let me start by reminding us the fact that EFCC is just 17 years old. And when the EFCC came on board, there was nothing new about the EFCC per se. Is it the powers of detention, the powers of prosecution? And if you look at the acts that you mentioned, which of course I myself mentioned, there was nothing new as at 2002 when EFCC first came on board. Of course, 2003 when the pioneer chairman was sworn in. Is it the Advanced Fee Fraud and Other Related Offences Act, or the Money Laundering Prohibition Act 1995, Failed Bank Recovery of Debt Act 1997, Banks and Other Financial Institutions Act 1991. What the EFCC's management brought on board is the fact that, look, we are resolute to ensure that once you cross the line, you face the music, we charge you to court. Right. So it is part of our responsibility to see that, of course, the small fries are also prosecuted as well as the big fries. Advanced fee fraud, of course, this is where maybe an area and cybercrime, as you mentioned, where the small fries normally play around with, and they cross the line there and we charge them to court. And of course, most often than not, of course, we secured conviction on that. And of course, the big ones, we charge them to court as well, based on what we have found out. But issues of delays or whether or not we secure conviction at the end of the day is for the courts to determine. And over the years, for the first time, governors were prosecuted, senators were prosecuted, ministers were prosecuted, senators, etc. We have tried, and we are improving to ensure that, of course, more and more of them, are also charged and also convicted. We are working tirelessly, on that aspect as well.
All right. On the other leg of it,
the media trial. It is part of our responsibility to let Nigerians know what we are doing. The provisions of Section 6 of the EFCC Act is very clear that we should carry out rigorous, public campaign against the ills of corruption. And part of the other aspect that we are empowered to do is on the prevention. Nigerians need to know that, look, once you do this, this applies to you. Are we the ones, saying some of these things within the media? Maybe we have improved investigative journalism, and we have good, investigative journalists that are bringing this to the fold. But you tend to see that most of the things that the media is repeating are things that are already in court. Once you file a matter in court, it becomes in the public domain. Anybody can have access to it. But we have not seen a situation whereby investigation report is being sent to the media for them to sensationalize, etc., etc. Are we saying that all in all, we have not, maybe in one way or another, over the years, give media some certain information regarding that? I don't know about it. As you said, I only came on board in February. But what I will assure you is that if there is anything like that going forward, it's not going to happen again.
Now, the question of special courts, people have suggested that. You think this will speed up the prosecution of cases and bring justice to those who deserve it?
Yes and no. If you have special courts, are they going to use different procedures? Are they going to use different evidence act? Because one of the crux of the problem of the delays in court is more or less a constitutional problem. Of course, lawyers, the judges themselves have said, look, for you to succeed in this, you need to go back to the National Assembly and ensure that there is a new legal framework in all of this. Hiding under fair hearing, of course, which is a constitutional provision, which is my right and yours, and indeed all Nigerians. A lot of things have happened down the years. And that is why I said that, yes, you may have the special courts, but that will not completely, ease out the problems. But it will ease out the problems of delays in prosecution, but it will not solve it. Now, by having special courts, that means you have courts that are dedicated, to hear economic and financial crimes cases. And that means that on day to day, we may be having our own trials. The judges are going to have experiences. They are going to develop expertise in the new trends and typologies of this. And of course, they will understand, the laws and the processes. And then, of course, it will go faster. But then even our act has envisaged problems like this. And I think Section 19 of the EFCC Act requires the Chief Judge of the Federal High Court and, of course, the Chief Judge of the Chief Judge of the Federal High Court and the Chief Judges of the State and FCT High Court to designate judges that will hear EFCC matters. And I believe with that, it will more or less, complement or have a replacement of the special court before we have it, if the chief judges are adhering strictly to this. We are talking to them. They have been doing it, but they need to do more in terms of designating judges that will hear strictly EFCC matters.
All right, let's come to your mode of operations now. As the chief executive of this agency now, one of the first things you said was to deal with assets declaration, particularly by bankers, and straight away that has generated so much controversy all over the place. Let's get it from you, this declaration, especially by bankers.
Well, yes, it has generated a lot of interest within the... what we said is that, look, there is a law called Bank Employees Declaration of Asset Act, 1986. I was 6 years old when that law came into being. It's not something new. And the EFCC did not say that come and declare your asset as bankers to us. What we said is that come June 1st, we are going to be demanding for it because we are empowered by law to demand information from in the public sector and of course in the private sector in the course of discharging our mandate. And the EFCC is empowered by law to enforce all economic and financial crime laws in Nigeria. And that is one of the laws. And that is the position. The banks or the financial institutions in this country are very critical in trying to curtail the problems of financial crimes. Right. At the tail end of every financial crime, the criminal wants to get the proceeds, and they use them as avenues, in connivance with them. They conspired with them. And we said, look, we need to know what you have. We need to be checkmating you and all of that. And that is...
Mr. Chairman, by issuing out that statement, it is suggestive of the fact that you think that for some time there has not been compliance. I mean, if there has been substantial compliance, then there would really not be any need to remind them. So it's safe to assume that there hasn't been compliance. Of course, you would know.
There hasn't been full compliance with that law. And I don't know if my memory serves me right. In 2016, CBN was also calling for the bankers to comply. Yes, some have complied, some have not complied, and all of it. And all that we said, the law is there. Authorities that are empowered to get these acts is very clearly written in the law, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, etc., etc. All that we said is, look, come June 1, we are going to be demanding for these things. We want to look at what we have. We want to look at all sorts of things, vis-a-vis other information and intelligence that we have. That's just what we said.
You're going to be dealing here with the financial institutions and some powerful individuals. From 1st of June, you put your foot down, you will demand.
Yes.
And you'll carry through.
Certainly. Certainly. It's something that as an institution we have resolved to do, and it's something that we want to do. Of course, we expect stiff resistance and all of it, but we are determined we will do it.
All right. Still on the subject of assets. So many people have had their assets confiscated. We've had results of some after convictions as assets. We need to talk about that because that has always been part of the problem. What happens to those assets, how they're managed, the return of assets, these are issues that have been going on over and over again. And in some cases, you hear things like, oh, well, when those assets are recovered, personnel of the agency go ahead and illegally sell out those assets or let them out for a fee. You must have heard about it. In fact, at a point in time, there were reports that this was a wide, it was going on a wide scale.
Well, when it comes to these issues of recovered assets, the provision of the law is very clear. There are victims, of these crimes. Mm. Somebody has gotten somebody's money and fraudulently, and he left, and assets are recovered from that individual. Of course, it will be returned to him. State government have lost money through its former governor, and of course, assets are recovered from that former governor. Of course, it will be returned back to the state. There are other assets, of course, that are recovered for the federal government. It will be returned back to the federal government. But there are stages. Issues of identification, tracing, and recovery of assets are there. All these are stages. But then, of course, before trial is concluded in court, where matters are charged to court, those assets are normally based on our own application on interim for future. So they need to be managed by us. And the EFCC have a full-fledged Directorate of Asset for Future Management that manage these assets. Normally we don't manage, we tend to engage estate managers to manage these assets. And where proceeds from the rents are gathered, of course they are being kept in an account, now with Central Bank of Nigeria. And then at the end of the trial, after the pronouncement of the court, whosoever is the victim, needs to be restituted. And what the law says is that it should be sold, and after the sales of the assets, the proceeds, if it is the federal government, to be paid into consolidated revenue funds. Have we been following these stages, in its entirety? In some instances, yes. In others, no, because of some certain, controversial circumstances of appeals, etc., and all of that. But what I can guarantee you is that there is no EFCC official that will tend to recover an asset, and then he will now go ahead and sell that asset, or he will now let it out and then take out the fee. How can he even do that? Because different departments do some of these things. Investigators are the ones that trust. The lawyers are the ones that goes to the court to get them. And then the Department of Asset Forfeiture are the ones that manages it. So all this thing is in an open. So who is that person? The chief executive don't see assets. They don't see them. They only see them on paper, and maybe on some occasions, like any other Nigerian, if you are passing and then you see that this asset is still, then you know that yes, we are doing this.
That brings me to this. But perhaps I should ask you this. You do go around sometimes and you see structures, buildings, keep off, EFCC boldly painted on them, and they're there for a while. Sometimes it says keep off, and sometimes activities are carried on in those structures, especially some that are commercially oriented. Then after a while, even with the bold EFCC keep off print, things just go back to normal. How do you explain that?
Well, as I explained to you, keep off is maybe it may be under investigation. Keep up is under interim for future. Case has been concluded. The victim has taken his property. Final for future of it, or the government decided to do something with his recovered assets. Of course, we are going to see that activities are turned back to normal. So it depends from which perspective you are looking at all those issues.
Also in line with that, when convictions are secured and it turns out that these properties are to be disposed of, is there any check to ensure that the same people who forfeited these assets do not, through proxies, buy them back? Because I'm looking at a scenario where someone does a plea bargain. That means he probably hasn't given up all he's taking, and he still has resources. And then the structures are put up for sale. He gets some proxies to buy them back. Is there any way to cross-check and ensure that the same people don't go back and repossess these properties?
Certainly. Looking at individuals that comes forward to see, you have to look at their financial viability, whether or not they are not proxies. You have to look at their profile. You have to look at their pedigree. You understand? The auctioneers are there. All of these things are being carried out in the EFCC under the office of the Secretary to the Commission. And there are parameters to look at before you do. But as we said in money laundering, you tend to see that somebody somewhere is the ultimate beneficial owner, that he can even hire somebody that can come and stand in as the ultimate beneficial owner, to come and get some of these things. It's at times very difficult, but it's something that, we have the expertise to dictate. It's very, very difficult for somebody to, for a property to be recovered from somebody and then he will get back and go and get it. But you mentioned something regarding plea bargain. Plea bargain are not issues that we sit down and say, okay, you take 20 properties, you take this.
Yeah, but
is the plea that you have entered in the first instance of plea of guilty, you want to come for lesser sentencing, etc. That is what plea bargain is. Not that EFCC will sit down with you and say, okay, you have 10, take 3, the government is taking 7. No.
Yeah, well, they go through the court process and it leads to a lesser a crime, so that he gets a smaller punishment.
It's a win-win situation for everyone, and the law provides for it.
Yeah, the law provides for it. But again, we're looking at this, that the other aspect of it does cost a lot to prosecute cases.
Certainly.
Is that one of the challenges, the serious challenges the EFCC faces, because you're going after the big-time economic and financial criminals. It's going to cost a lot, and again, it calls to question the prosecutory, competence of the EFCC. Like they always say, the criminals have enough to hire the biggest legal counsel. What is the position of the EFCC?
Well, I've said it in this, during my screening in the Senate, Cyril. We have 98% success rate in court. For every 100 cases that the EFCC have taken to court, guarantee you 98 of those cases are in our favor, and which is an A, anywhere, anytime. Are we saying that we are perfect? Are we expected to win every case that we file in court? Certainly not. But we are doing well. No agency of government in the last 15 years have contributed immensely to the development of law than the EFCC. We have a saying, we say it even with senior lawyers and judges. Without the activities of the EFCC, we couldn't have even the New Evidence Act. It is throughout the processes of cases that we file in court that, some of these issues are unearthed that we need to amend. Of course, nothing was going on in terms of criminal prosecution in this country, particularly in relation to financial crimes, until the EFCC comes on board. And yes, we may have young lawyers in the EFCC, but they are very, very competent. Yesterday, I was happy and elated during one of my meetings with some when they are commending, the activities of our own prosecutors. And where need be, from time to time, you are aware, of course, we tend to engage, external solicitors, to counter some of the big lawyers that you talked about. Right. Yes, they are big lawyers, they are senior advocates with due respect to them. But of course, they have been having their match in terms of the young lawyers that we have, who we hope that in the next, in no distance future, they are going to be senior lawyers themselves.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of cases, there are quite a number of high-profile cases which Nigerians are interested in, and these cases have been on for a while. I'd like to take you to some of them. One particular one has to do with a former Attorney General and Minister of Justice, Mohammed Bello Adoke, and the Malabu scam.
Yes. What about it?
Yes, that has had so many twists and turns. At a particular time, it was thought that there was some frustration in the process of getting this case off the ground. And what's the status?
Well, it's really to be sub judice for us to be discussing matters that are in court. But the briefings that I have is that we have 3 cases, one with the FCT High Court and 2 at the Federal High Court, that we are prosecuting around, the issues of Malabu and other, associated individuals and juristic persons. I think, and prosecution is going on.
Tied to that, this is another one that's come up, and in fact, it's the EFCC is being, as an organization, said to have developed a cold feet in prosecuting that case and seeing it to a logical conclusion at some point in time. But Nigerians do want to know. The one involving a former Minister of Petroleum Resources, and that's talking about Mrs. Diezani Alison Madueke. Where are we with that case?
Well, there are several cases, surrounding that. As you may have read, and all of that was part and parcel of that investigation. And we have done quite a lot. In one of the cases, we have recovered $153 million US. We have finally forfeited over 80 properties in Nigeria, valued of which is about $80 million US. We have done quite a bit on that. And the other cases, as it relates to the $115 million, INEC bribery case, as the media have sensationalized it, is also ongoing, across the federation. So we are doing well on that. We are doing well on that, and we are looking forward to the time when we will maybe have her in the country and, of course, review things and see what will happen going forward.
This has not been abandoned.
Certainly not.
No.
When you have done this, when you have gone this far in terms of recoveries, etc., and there are still a lot more to recover, but we'll get there.
I talked about some high-profile cases that have been in the public view, and there's still another one, yet another one. In fact, in your answer to one of the questions earlier, and you talked about first-time former governors, senators, have been prosecuted. There is the issue of Senator Ojus of Kalu,
yes,
and the sharp and sudden twist in it. What's the EFCC's position now?
The position is very clear. The EFCC have succeeded in 12 years to get him convicted,
right,
at the Federal High Court. Convicted at the Federal High Court. Of course, went to the Supreme Court, to the fact that the judge that convicted him has been elevated, and of course, the ruling, of course, the EFCC is a respecter of the rule of law. We have taken it as it is, and the Supreme Court have ordered that we should go back to court, and back to Federal High Court in Lagos. And now we are in Federal High Court in Abuja, and we have applied, to the court for the case to be transferred to Lagos as ordered by the Supreme Court,
okay,
to enable us, start all over again. Yeah, and that's why we are. That's the position of the case.
Okay. All right. So Nigerians will be looking closely at that and see how it carries out. But it does set a precedence, doesn't it?
Yeah, certainly it does. And those are the issues. Law, as the lawyers will say, is a living thing. Some of these challenges, we had the AJA in 2015. We have had this problem of elevation of judges from Federal High Court, from High Court to Court of Appeal. And we lobbied, we pushed that, let them be given the opportunity to come and finish some of their cases, because some of these cases take a very long time. And we thought we have succeeded in getting that in AJA. And the law was not seen as that, which of course we have taken in confidence. I think now is the problem of maybe trying to solve the problem from the Constitution, and then we'll be home and dry in terms of that problem.
Financial crimes and fraud is a global phenomenon.
It is.
At this point, we must ask what the collaboration is with international bodies in tackling these issues here, especially as at least it's widely known that many times people who engage in this in the country take the proceeds to other countries.
Certainly.
And it becomes extremely difficult to go through the maze and even get some of those properties or funds repatriated.
It's a huge challenge, actually, to get proceeds of crime repatriated to Nigeria and indeed to all other victim countries. But I think the world is growing in that regard. You are aware of the UNCAC, the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, that have provisions regarding this. That Nigeria is a signatory to several bilateral agreements regarding that, etc. Recently, the French government is working towards seeing that African countries have access to these funds that are repatriated to their country. Being laundered in their country for them to use, etc., etc. We have been working closely with our strategic partners, the US FBI, the UK NCA, the German police, the Australian Federal Police, etc., etc. And God willing, we will get there. The main challenge, actually, or starting with, before you ask for the recovery of this, you need to identify and trace. Nobody can give you what you have not seen. Yes, we know that, yes, with their own robust system, they ought to be aware, regarding that, look, these things are not real, and etc. But then there is nobody that is stealing funds and then he will go and hide them in his own name. And that is why you have all these offshore jurisdiction, tax havens, etc., etc. In recent years, you have had the issues of Panama Papers, etc., where the world is now being educated regarding the global web of money laundering and schemes that happens, across the world. So it's a very difficult thing. It's a very challenging thing for everybody, in financial crime investigation, etc. But then, of course, the law enforcement is also growing, and hopefully we'll get there one day.
One of your responsibilities is to prevent these things from happening. What is the strategy in prevention from your end? Now you have the opportunity as head of this organization, and as you rose through the ranks, you must have seen where there are loopholes here and there.
There are several things to look at in terms of prevention. As a young officer, upon graduation, we are asked to write something, and my colleagues were busy writing, on investigation on this, on that. But I wrote on something different. I wrote on attitudinal change, a catalyst against economic and financial crimes. In Nigeria, we need to change our attitude. We are worshipping these issues. We are worshipping people that have money without necessarily asking how they got this money. We tend to see it as a way of success. That yes, you have arrived. You are sitting on a big seat, then of course you should have access to all of these things. And I think that is the first thing. Reorientation is very key. And we are trying to engage with stakeholders, with religious organizations. Very soon in 2012, we started something in the EFCC which we call interfaith dialogue. We bring in leaders from the Christian religion. We bring in leaders from the Islamic part of religion, and of course to come up, and we even come up with the way to go. And that is one aspect, generally, that Nigerians needs to change his attitude. It's part of also the preventive tied to this, of course, is the issue of public enlightenment on some of these things. Right. Prosecuting offenders is also a preventive tool whereby, people are saying that, look, if you do this, this is what is going to happen to you. And so we are going to rigorously continue to prosecute offenders, particularly the big fish, as you mentioned, Cyril. We are going to do that. And as I mentioned, going forward, we will tend to do more of a proactive approach to some of these things. The management under my leadership have recently created a Directorate of Intelligence. A new department of intelligence was established now in the EFCC just 2 weeks ago. It's just taken off, to be able to gather some of this intelligence and proactively, curtail this. And of course, going forward too, we have to, re-engage ourselves with the stakeholders. It's not something that the EFCC can do alone. We can't be a long ranger into this. We are lucky that the EFCC, as I said, is apparently the biggest, multi-agency kind of setup, looking at the composition of the board. We all have almost all the law enforcement in our own board. So it will be easy for us to reach out to them to say, look, this is your baby, you have to assist and help. And several other things that I don't want to mention. The issue of the bank's declaration of asset we talked about is also part of the preventive issues that we are trying to look at, and several other issues as well.
All eyes are on you at this point to reposition the EFCC. How do you intend to go about that?
I've just mentioned one issue now.
That's one.
The issue of, preventive active.
Yeah. Then let's concentrate now on the operatives of the EFCC, its modes of operations. What are you bringing to the table?
Well, nothing is new. The fact that leadership have changed. The vision is the same, to rid this country of economic and financial crime. The mission is the same, to be the best law enforcement agency, the leading agency in financial crime. The laws that the EFCC are empowered to enforce are the same. Yes, of course, we have a change of path. It's the reorientation of the officers themselves is very key. And then, of course, we are looking at several issues of rules and regulations that should guide us, standard operation procedures. Since when I came on board, I don't want to be mentioning things, I will not go to details. We have raised about 10 committees within the EFCC to look at various issues that concerns us. Luckily for us, I'm somebody from within the system. So we have identified the problems. We are looking at solving them. Are we saying that we have the monopoly of knowledge? You know, if you have any idea on how you think we can improve, we are looking at all of that. And God willing, after the committees have bring the report, we tend to implement them in total. But the main goal that we intend to achieve with all of this thing is to develop an institution, is to grow as an institution that respects the rule of law in its entirety, extant laws of this country, as well as our own procedures. I envisage a situation whereby in EFCC, in no distant future, I, as the chairman, will give somebody an instruction to say, go and do this, and he will look through my eyes and say, Mr. Chairman, I've understood your instruction, but because of the provision of section this of the standard operational procedure, I cannot do that. Then that is an institution, and that is what we intend to take the EFCC to.
Speaking of which, I'd just like to come to you with this now. It's been suggested that considering all what happened, leading up to your appointment, it's been suggested in some quarters that there's just a chance you would owe your allegiance to certain individuals and institutions.
Well, that is not true, Cyril. I don't know whether I'm allowed to put in a regalia of immodesty for a while. I rose through the ranks, Cyril. The only job I know after graduation is that of the EFCC, which I joined in 2004. All the institutions you talk about and the individuals you talked about, where were they in 2004? I rose through the ranks from an ordinary team member to the first EFCC team leader from the regular staff of the EFCC. I became a sectional head, became a zonal head in Ibadan, zonal head in Port Harcourt, and zonal head in Lagos. Lagos is the biggest operational hub of the EFCC, with over 600 personnel. Port Harcourt is next to it in terms of complexity and staff strength. I happen to be the first EFCC regular staff to head 3 different zones before my appointment as the chairman. What I have done is there, the records are there, and I happen to be the first. I'm very happy and elated to be here. And it's a challenge that I have taken upon myself to do it without fear or favor. And that's the truth. If anybody is coming to ask me to do something that is contrary to my conscience or contrary to what the EFCC is set out to do, I'm going to resign. I know the responsibility, I know the challenges. I'm 40 years old. Ordinarily I should retire in 2039. But now I can leave office today if the president so wish. I'm aware of it. I'm aware that I can leave office when the tenure of the president ends in 2 years' time. I'm aware that we are going to have a new president in 2023. I'm aware that that president may allow me to finish my tenure in 2025, or he can renew it. So a career that I have dedicated myself to do, I have done 17 years. I was hoping to do 35 years. Unknown to me, I was destined by the Almighty to become the first regular chairman. And I've taken it with all sense of responsibility to do. So nobody is coming to say that do this, as if, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to allow that to happen. And that is the promise I've made Nigerians. If it is sacrifice, I've already sacrificed to say that I can go today. As a young man, if you retired from a career job at the age of 40 or 41, it's a huge sacrifice. But I'm ready to do it. And my colleagues have seen the sacrifice, and they are joining me in actualizing that vision and that dream. We need to do something. Somebody needs to take responsibility of doing what is right for this country. And that is it.
You're aware of the saying that corruption fights back?
Yes, I'm aware.
And you're resolute. And you'd have to step on toes and fight the establishment.
Yeah.
Where I'm going to is simple. You've also described yourself as a young man. You're a young man. What does this portend for the young generation of Nigerians who aspire to be professionals in their fields. I suppose you would also now be looked upon as a leader.
Certainly, every officer in every organization, to start with, if you want to be good at what you do, you should aspire to head that organization. What is right is what is right. 100 wrongs, Cyril, can never make a right. And that is what we expect from the young Nigerians. They should look at what is expected of them. You know, the future lies with us. We're supposed to do the right thing, not to break the law, but to ensure that the law is being followed strictly. And that is it. As the saying goes, you know, Nigeria have come a long way, and we have had series of young leaders come and go as well. But I think with what has happened now is the responsibility of every Nigerian, the elderly and of course the young, you know, to work together to ensure that this country is taken to its desired destination of being the giant of Africa and indeed the giant of the world. And that is it. I'm only a person that within the square of where I stand, I intend to do the right thing. If I'm doing the right thing, another person close to me is doing the right thing. And then of course we have a better society, a better community, and then a better nation. That is what is expected of everybody, to ensure that at all point in time, the right thing is being done.
AbdulRasheed Bawa, Executive Chairman, Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. It's been interesting talking to you.
Thank you very much, really. It's a pleasure. It's a
Everyone.
pleasure. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Right. And that's our program today. We thank you for watching. Next week we'll be back with One on One. I am Cyril Stover. Continue to do the right thing.